Hello, 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 everybody. This is Liz here. I am joining you as usual from Central Virginia on the unceded ancestral lands of the Monica Nation. And I am so grateful that you are here with me today. So, in the beginning, back when I had my very first inklings and interest in learning about the sacred feminine, I was feeling really alone. It was an intuitive thing that came to me. It wasn't like anything that I'd found or had seen formally presented to me. And at the time, I didn't have anybody in my immediate circle of friends that I felt like I could talk to about this. So I would go and I would hunt around and poke around Amazon and the internet and like, surely, there's information out here that can resonate and help me. And it's funny, this seems much easier now I feel like there's more available now than when I started several years ago, which maybe will be something we talk about in the show. But what I do remember is that very early on, I came across this wonderful website called Motherhouse of the Goddess. And I just remember feeling like this huge sigh of relief to know that there were other women out there who were deeply invested in exploring this topic of the goddess and the divine feminine. It was just, I was so grateful. And so the founder of the Mother House of the Goddess has been on my podcast guest wish list pretty much since I started 2 years ago. And I am so grateful that she is here with me today and we are finally getting to talk. It feels long overdue. Kimberly Moore is a priestess and daughter of goddess, a creative catalyst and mentor for women, and a Shakti-powered entrepreneur. She is the founder of Motherhouse of the Goddess, the founder and director of Mystery School of the Goddess. She's also the host of the wonderful Goddess Alive Radio podcast. And as a priestess and spiritual teacher, her areas of research, practice, and teaching are focused on goddess spirituality, priestess training, comparative mythology, archetypal psychology, and ritual practice. I feel like we could just unpack all that for hours. Kimberly has a special connection to the goddesses from the Greek, Hindu, and Yoruban traditions, but has worked with many other goddesses through the years. She's also an Abarisha in the Lukumi tradition and a daughter of Oshun. Kimberly lives in Delaware with her son, her kitties, and more than 200 images of deity. Kimberly, this is so great. I'm so glad to meet you and to have this conversation with you.
Oh, Liz, thank you so much. And you too have been on my wish list as well. It's so funny. And I listen to your podcasts and they're wonderful. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, and same to you. Same to you. It's like a mutual admiration society we got going here. I really did feel like, oh, we are kindred spirits and it is high time that we meet.
Yes, I'm so glad. I was so excited.
Yeah, me too. So I want to make sure I always usually start at like the roots, like where we began from a religious or spiritual practice. And one of the reasons I usually start there is just because I didn't start with any kind of goddess background. And so I'm always curious if other people did. So I'd love to just hear about your background and your upbringing and what that was like.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I was a weird kid. I'll start with that.
Weren't we all? I feel like probably we all were. Yeah.
I know it really. And, I was actually raised without religion of any kind. There wasn't really anyone around me that was religious. And however, one of my gifts is being able to see spirit. And I see spirit like I see people, which was pretty disconcerting for a little kid.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Did anybody else in your family have that gift or that they were speaking about?
No, but
Okay.
well, my great grandmother, she used to do funny things like, she'd go, "Ooh, Lorraine is going to call." And like 2 minutes later, the phone would ring and it would be her, it was like that kind of stuff.
Wow.
But I don't know. It was just really, it was kind of how you know, I'm stuttering a little bit. Let's start. Okay. My parents were great. My parents never told me no. Nobody in my family ever said that's not true, that's not happening. Unfortunately, my brother's gift, he's 3 years younger than me, is apocalyptic visionary dreams.
Wow.
So his is pretty intense. I'm 52 now. And I did a lot of training over the years to control, my
Yeah.
gift and also be able to direct it. Unfortunately, he is not, and his it still continues. Um, but my parents just kind of rolled with it. In fact, my mom was an emergency room nurse when I was born, and the group that they ran with, my parents, that kind of like partied with and ran around with, were a lot of them ER nurses, and they went to a psychic. And the psychic said that my mom was going to have a blonde, curly haired child with blue eyes who was extremely psychic and to be ready for that. Um, and you can't tell now, but I had blonde curly hair when I was little, blue
Mm.
eyes. And I don't know, my parents just kind of rolled with it.
Wow.
I was a sleepwalker, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I was very anxious when I was young, sleeping, which is actually how I met Goddess. So, um, my parents were big entertainers. I would sneak down the stairs and sit on the stairs and listen to what was going on because I was nosy like that. And I'm a Cold War kid. I'm 52 years old. And so there was a lot of talk. I live in Delaware, and that's where I grew up. And, people would casually say things like, well, of course, Delaware would be ground zero, or, things like that. Yeah. And, you know, when you're 5, like, that's intense.
Oh, yeah.
And so what happened is, um, I was laying in bed one night, and every time I heard a plane, I was afraid that plane was a Russian plane with a bomb. Like,
Mhm.
that's where I was. I was so anxious. And, my entire bed was filled with, like, all my little, stuffed animals and books. I took books to bed for safety. You can imagine. Excuse me. And, anyway, one night this was going on, and I was really anxious, and, all of a sudden I felt really warm and, like, peaceful, and I rolled over, and there was a lady in my window. And I kind of like I'm, like, looking, and I went, like, "Oh." And she didn't move, like, her mouth didn't move, but I could hear her, and, like, she just started telling me really lovely stories
Mm.
and, like, soothing me, and I would talk back to her, and this went on for several years, and my parents would be like, "Who are you talking to?" And I go, "The lady." And they go, "Okay." Like,
Mm.
okay. Now, also, apparently, when I was 3, I don't remember this, I had a prophetic dream about my great-grandfather dying, and I told my parents, and he did indeed pass. It happened again when I was, 8 with my great-grandmother,
Wow.
and I told my parents, and so even to this day, if I call a cousin or something kind of unawares, they're like, "Did you have a dream? Is everything okay?" Like, like I'm
That's
like a little angel of death. No, it's good. I'm just calling to say hi. But it was a thing. And how interesting that even my extended family kind of accepted all of it. So anyway, I
yes.
didn't have any religion though, but I knew about God, and I don't know how to explain that. And to me, God was male and female. I don't know how to
Mm.
explain that either,
Mm.
but when I talked to my godmother about it, she's like, "You were just always that way," you know? And, so anyway, when I was, 7, like, going into 3rd grade, my parents sent me to Catholic school, because I was kind of torturing my public school teachers. And, so they're like, "The nuns will sort her," and they sent me to the Ursulines, who are known for their education. And we have a convent here in Delaware that's over 100 years old. The school has been around for that long as well. And anyway, that's where they sent me. So first day of school, I go into the playground, and I had to cut through one of like the little areas right by the convent to get to the entrance of the school. And there was my lady.
Oh.
And she was adorned in flowers because it was the opening of school, so the nuns had, like, decorated her, and I kinda went I remember that moment, like, standing there going, "What is my lady doing here?" And for as much as I had, like, an understanding of God and that, I knew who Jesus was very loosely, like, that's it, and then he had a mom, but I didn't know, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, "Wow." What's really interesting is my mom gave me some papers recently, um, that she found, and I drew a picture of my lady, and what is so fascinating is she had darker hair and this light blue mantle, but she looks very much like the Star of the Sea, Stella Maris,
Yes.
and my birthday is on her feast day.
Oh, wow.
I know. So it's like all these cool synchronicities that I didn't find out till years later, you know?
Yes.
So, I was with the nuns for 10 years.
Wow.
Continued my weirdness. They dealt with it mostly when in 8th grade when, we were doing a fundraiser and all of us had to do something to raise money at a fair, right? So I pitched the tent dressed up like a gypsy in red palms.
Mm.
And the nuns were like, "What are we gonna do with her?" And they would call my parents, and my dad would be like, "And her grades are excellent. We pay you. Deal with it," kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I was interested. I was really interested in learning about the theology, right? Of understanding it. And I had some really great people along the way, Liz, like priests or nuns that I could talk to, that I could ask questions, that I could sit down and like be real with. And I mean, even then, Goddess was kind of, winding her way in. So in 1993, I moved to Florida quite spontaneously. My dad had been transferred, and I kind of went through a thing with the guy I thought I was going to marry, and my dad said, "Come to Florida," and I went, "Okay." That was 1993. Of course, the first thing I did was, right, in that day and age, I opened a phone book and um,
Right.
and I looked for a bookstore, and the bookstore turned out to be owned by the woman that is to this day my best friend.
Oh, wow.
And we discovered we had a lot of things in common and that we were really interested in stuff, spiritual stuff. But like in Delaware at that time, now we have a really amazing covens and things like that are going on in southern Delaware, but at the time none of that existed. So I really felt like alone. Like the library was my only friend in what I don't even know what all this is.
Yeah.
Um so anyway, I met her the week after. I was driving down a road in South Florida, and I was on my way to a job interview, and I saw this sign, and it said, "Daughters of Isis." I almost crashed my car. I was like, "What? What is it?" It was so funny,
Yeah.
and, I mean, I did a U-turn, and I pulled in, and I sat there, and I walked in, and the smell was so familiar. It was like incense and plants and magic, you know? There were crystals and oils and statues and books and herbs and there was a guy there and he just said, "Hi, look around." And I was like, "Thank you." And like I picked up a crystal and it literally like sizzled in my hand. I dropped it and
Wow.
and he said, "Oh yeah, that happens sometimes." And I'm like, "Really? Okay." That man turned out to be my ceremonial magic teacher years later. I
Oh,
studied with him
wow.
for 7 years,
Oh,
Kabbalah and ceremonial magic.
wow.
So, that was my entry.
Mhm.
Um, Daughters of Isis ran a coffee house. My best friend and I attended for a couple months, and then one night, one of the owners was looking around, it was so busy, and he looked at me and he goes, "You, do you want a job?" And I went, "Okay, what do I have to do?" He goes, "Make coffee and tea." Like, "Okay." and I ended up running their coffee house on the weekends. I ran private duty home health agencies during the week. I would be on
Wow.
call on the weekends, and I would run the coffee house.
Wow.
And that was my Gwen Berry, Daughters of Isis, Asa Hoffman,
I've heard
you
of
know?
Daughters of Isis. Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
Oh my
I know
gosh.
we're all still connected. I just got off the phone yesterday for Kim Murphy. I mean, we all still talk and are connected. But that really is where I began my training.
Yeah.
The first book I read was Voices of the Goddess by Caitlin Matthews.
Wow.
And I
Amazing.
was off.
So I have so many questions. Well, just like things I want to go back to and touch
Yeah.
upon on your story. So one thing that I want to say quickly here, so because listeners have actually contacted me and pointed this out to me, so I'm going to presence it here for all of us, is
Mm.
the word gypsy. While we use it very in a way that is, I know exactly how you mean it, and I know
And I was in
exactly what
eighth
you mean.
grade. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and I know that exactly, and I think we use it in a Stevie Nicks kind of term. However, I just
Yeah.
want to acknowledge that some of my listeners have pointed out to me on based on prior shows that that word for the Romani people means something different. So I just want to presence that here. Um,
And I'll say years later, working in the hospital while I was in nursing school, I was a bed coordinator for a 1,000 bed hospital. And I had occasion to meet with the Romanis when they had people that were injured. And what they do is they come and kind of camp out at the hospital.
oh
So
wow.
I had an opportunity to gift that back and learn more, if
Oh,
you
I
will.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I
So
love that.
it
Yeah.
was really cool.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and and just I'll just put a footnote here. I mean, this is it's such an interesting time to navigate too. I mean, I know exactly what you mean, and I think most people, if they use that word, they use it not knowing about the context of the Romani people, and also it's a compliment. Usually, we're like, ah, this represents something. So, anyways,
Right, right.
yeah, yeah, this represents something that we imagine as positive. But I want to go back. So one of the things you were saying about the lady. Okay, so first of all, when you said the
Yes.
your lady, I was imagining her as Mary, and what came to mind for me was I don't know if you've read Clarissa Pinkola Este's book Untie the Strong Woman. Um,
Oh my, yes, it's so dog-eared, it's crazy. I love
yes.
Dr. E. She's one of my other favorite peoples in the universe. Yes,
Oh,
I love
she's so incredible. And so I was thinking of there's a story in that book in the very beginning where she's a little girl and she is kind of drawn to the water and she's going into the
yeah.
water into a place that's dangerous. And a lady appears and is sort of playing with her and kind of shushing her back up to the sand to a place where it's safe. And later
Mm,
she's like, I saw the lady. And her family thinks it's just the lighthouse. There's a lighthouse out in the distance, but she
yeah.
knows that it is someone different. So, and then when you said you saw her, I don't know, I felt such a little twinge in my heart, you know, like, oh yes, of
I
course it was her. It was her.
it was Liz, I can't even tell you, and to this day, I can't even tell you how many Marys I have in my
Oh,
house and Black Madonnas. I mean, they have their own altar
wow.
because
Yeah.
um and I do novenas for them now through Mystery School of the Goddess, and but Mary has been with me always.
Mm,
Um, always. We had a gorgeous Marian chapel. You can imagine. I mean, our convent was the Ursulines convent was over 100 years old. It was all wood and stone, and the old Murphy's furniture polish kind of smell. And
yes.
the nuns kept it with you know um, lilies and flowers and just
Mm,
and sometimes because um, I had to wait. My mom worked at the hospital, so my dad would pick me up after school. So there were a couple years that I stayed at the convent until he picked me up. And I would just wander. And sometimes I would take books in and I'd lay in the pews.
oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I love
So
that.
I was really, kind of, it just kind of seeped into me and confirmed my lady, every
Yeah.
step of the way.
Well, and one of the things that I wanted to ask you as I was listening to you talk about this too. So you had My Lady, which, and anybody who's listened to the show probably knows this already that about me, but just to be clear, like I don't just attach Mary to the Catholic tradition in any way. Like to me, she's the through line for me to, in my own ancestral lineage to the goddess that preceded her. That's how I experience her. But
Yeah,
so you've sort of referenced the lady, and then her presence in the Catholic school that you went to, and then you mentioned Isis, and so I I I used to ask people like, well, you kind of answered this. When did the divine feminine show up for you? But I've been wanting to change this question to more around language and how we get language to match our experience of the divine. And I don't know if you would say divine feminine. I noticed, in your bio, you use the word goddess. It's Motherhouse of the goddess. But I'm wondering, like, how you see her and experience her. And clearly, you have relationships with lots of different
I do.
aspects of her. But I wonder how you would describe that.
Well, you know, goddess saved me. I mean, even in the beginning, with the lady. And then when I began my metaphysical training with my first spiritual teacher, and I was reading everything I could lay my hands on. And, I had a background already in loving mythology and stuff, and then to find this whole new world, right? And, but one of my very strong connections was with the dead. And, so when I was young and I would see spirit, it's like they were dead people. And sometimes it'd stand around my bed, or like if we go someplace like Williamsburg, I mean, forget it. It was like crowded, right?
Mhm.
So my first spiritual teacher really taught me how to filter that. I already had as a young person, like intuitively. Um, but what I also realized is that Goddess was there for me for all of this. And the goddess that stepped forward for that particular function, the dead, was Hecate. And
Yeah.
and I had a really powerful experience with her in January of 1996.
Can you tell us
Um,
just quickly, like for those who may not know Hecate, like who she is?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Hecate is classified as a Greek goddess, but we actually don't know what her origins are. I mean, one of her largest cults was in Sicily, as a matter of
Oh,
fact. She appears in places like, Bulgaria and Turkey, and she's a fascinating goddess. When we go back and read, even Zeus could not deny her. Like even Zeus was a little afraid of her, right? And he gave her Congress, free passage to sky, sea, and land. So Hecate is a psychopomp. She escorts the dead to the underworld. You probably are most familiar, for people, about the story of Demeter and Persephone.
yeah.
And I personally do not agree about the abduction scenario,
Yeah.
just as a thing. But when Demeter could not find Persephone, Hecate was the one who confirmed where she was. Hecate also was the goddess that worked with Persephone in the underworld to mentor her, and also then was the goddess that brought her back up, to become Kore again. So Hecate is a really interesting goddess. We see her with torches. The crossroads are sacred to her. And for some people, she's a very intimidating goddess. Um, but that's because of all the kind of the woo woo around her, right?
Mhm.
Connecting with her, she's one of the most powerful mentoring goddesses, who will be there for you and have your back, in my opinion.
Mm.
Um, and I had worked with her before, but in January of 96, she did a full on appearance for me.
Wow.
And I consider that my initiation to her as a priestess of Hecate. Um, and so I work with Hecate. We have a worship bargain. One of my favorite things, I'm a trained as a ceremonial magician as well. So I like things to be clear. And we have a worship bargain. And I never wanted to be a medium, Liz. If it comes out in a reading, that's one thing, that's fine, right?
Mhm.
But I don't want to be like that. I'm not a medium, like for function. But Hecate brings people, and I know they're from her for me to assist, and I do.
Mhm.
So I do work on soul retrieval. I do work on extractions of energy, and like a really weird, scary word, and I usually put it out there, but like exorcism type
Mhm.
things I have done with her for her
Wow.
on people that come to me. And I don't advertise that, but they find me,
Mm.
so
Mhm.
that's how it goes. So Hecate, but you know, if you're ever at a moment in your life that you understand transition is coming and you are standing at those crossroads, invoking Hecate is such a good idea to assist you on the next steps in your journey, for sure,
Mhm.
for sure. Does that help? Did I answer that? I know I went kind of rambling.
No, you didn't. I mean, I love that. And what I'm wondering too, because I also know that you have this relationship with Oshun, which is the daughter of Oshun and other deities as well, is that do, do you experience them as each their own entity? Are they faces of a larger idea of goddess to you, or how do you relate to them, I guess, maybe energetically and intellectually, or maybe those two things are the same for
Yeah.
you. I don't know.
For me,
Yeah.
I imagine that there is goddess, big G, right?
Hmm.
And that the goddesses are faces and representations of goddess. And, no one thing is complete for everyone, right? So, I mean, that's why monotheism to me just doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
Because, obviously, my gods, the gods of someone who's in Syria, the gods of someone in Africa, the gods of someone in Ireland and England, it's different. We all have different worldviews. And I believe that the gift of goddess is all of these intensely amazing and very unique emanations
Hmm.
that come because that's how she reaches everyone, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love that perspective. And that really resonates with me. And I definitely also feel like just in the last couple years of hosting the show that part of what she has been pointing me towards is that spaciousness of interpretations and different faces, and that we don't all have to agree. We don't even all have to see it the same
Right.
way. It's okay. It's all in its own way an emanation of her.
Yes, yeah. And so why when it happens, um I am a no drama llama. Our community is a no drama llama community.
Mm,
um and Knockwood has been very successful that way. But when I see things obviously on the internet and people say, you can't work with more than one goddess, or you can't do this, or oh, goddesses get angry and jealous. That is so untrue. I
mm,
just find that to be that is like, you know, the Abrahamic religions seeping into their, belief system personally, right? It's like there
mhm,
is one God, there is only one God, and he's a jealous and smiting God. Well, that didn't work for me either.
mhm,
And it
no.
certainly does not resonate for me with goddess. And what's so interesting, Liz, is that, I've been doing my priestess training for a really long time. I had a women's temple in South Florida, and it is my joy and my service to her. And but what I find is that women find me and find my training, and they're almost tentative, like they say to me, you know, Kimberly, but there are multiple goddesses. Like there are a lot of goddesses I like, and I go, that's awesome. And like nobody has said that to them in some cases, right? It's like that permission to say, can we not just revel in goddess? How amazing is it that when we need protection, we can call on Durga, right? Or when we need transition, we can call on Kali or Hecate, right? When we're eh, celebrating the seasons, we celebrate with Gaia and
Mhm.
Demeter, who adorns her. I mean, why why isn't it that way for some people? And I don't know the
Mhm.
answer other than, to me, they all move and rock and roll and blend together, even the
Mhm.
boys. I don't have a lot of boys in my house. And my son. However, I don't have a lot of male deities in my house. I do
Mhm.
have the male Hindus, and the male Orishas.
Mhm.
So, but otherwise, I don't really have male deities in my house.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this is kind of leading me to another question that I wanted to ask you too. And it's around the idea of this openness and this expansion and this embracing of like um, these faces of goddess that come to us, which
Yeah.
I totally understand. And I especially I know for myself, raised as a Protestant Christian, Mary wasn't even present. Like there was no divine
Oh,
feminine in any aspect of my life. And so it made a lot of sense to me that like early on, a face that appeared to me in meditation was that of Kali. I didn't even know who she was. I just
oh,
there was like a blue
amazing.
skinned goddess that showed up one day, and I was like, what do I do with this? So that resonates with me so much. And then I also have this question of as a white woman, and we exist in this space where we're living in a country that is just like rife with history of colonialism and taking stuff that isn't ours. Like
Yeah.
how do we dance with these energies in ways that honor that they're calling to us and are also respectful? And I have to imagine if you are I don't know if the word ordained is correct, but you are an abarisha, you are which is part
Initiate it.
initiated, okay, part of the Lukumi tradition, which comes out of Africa, if I'm correct. Like I would imagine that you've navigated this yourself too.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll tell you quickly about my Orishas, who are my beloveds, and
Okay.
in fact, my Poppy is and Oshun are sitting right next to me, and I
Mm.
call Alegua Poppy, so people might think that's kind of weird, but oh well. But let me show you. This is mine, and he doesn't usually come out for pictures.
Yes, and so maybe you can describe too for those who aren't on or
Yeah.
watching.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is my Alegua, right?
Hmm.
And he has two faces.
Yeah.
One that looks at the roads ahead and one that
Okay.
looks at the past and the roads behind and the ancestors.
Wow.
So I received that in an initiation. So basically in 1995, I met the Orishas. Um, we had, and it was through Daughters of Isis, we were invited to an Egungun ceremony, which is a Yoruba Nigerian ceremony. A friend of Daughters of Isis, Nathaniel, who's now a chief, and I'm so grateful to still be connected with him, um, had a tragedy in his family, basically, and they were making him the head of the family. And they flew in the entire team. His parents had homes in Nigeria, they had businesses in Nigeria and the US. And Nathaniel was mostly raised in the US. And in Pompano had received like the businessman of the year. I mean, like, he's such an interesting, very cool person. And now he does the village of Oshun in Miami. And anyway, we went to this Agungun ceremony, and and they had dancers and drummers, and oh my God, Liz, it was like amazing, and we were the only white people there. I mean, So anyway, we're sitting there, and the dancers were getting started, and all of a sudden, I felt this like surge of energy. It was like somebody just plugged me in somewhere, And I kind of looked at my the spiritual teacher, and he leaned over and he said, "That was a sacrifice." Not so they didn't do that publicly, that was private, which is part of the Yoruban traditions, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, and I was like, "Wow, okay." So the dancers started, and I was watching them, and the next thing I knew is that my friend Kim had me by my collar, and I was getting ready to step into the dancer space. I mean, I had moved all the way across the yard and had no memory of it.
Wow.
And it just was the moment that the Orishas came into my life. And I had such a strong response to it. I thought, well, I really need to learn more, right?
Yeah.
South Florida is a great place to learn,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a
Lots
lot
of
of
different
Santeria.
cultures. Yeah.
Yeah,
Landing there. Yeah.
botanicas, lakumi, the Haitian Vodun, and all of it is there. And so I approached the Orishas in the same way that I approach all deities, respectfully,
Yeah.
like, "Hi there, I'm interested in you." And they, since that time, have been very powerful forces in my life. They've come to me at different times. Um, it's just been very powerful. So this is so funny. I actually, so many years later, um, I was doing a Goddess Alive radio with Louisa Tish.
Yeah.
Yay is amazing, right?
Yeah.
So after the radio show, we talked and talked and talked, right? And that night I went to sleep, and I heard her talking all night. Now Yay is also a daughter of Oshun.
Yes,
Um,
she's written a wonderful book I think back in the 90s called Jambalaya for the Soul. I just highly,
yes.
highly recommend it. She's on my wish list for the podcast too.
Oh my gosh, and she's a she's
Yeah.
an amazing priestess and everything, yes.
Mhm.
You would yes, please get her. So, I woke up the next morning, and I knew it was time for me to initiate. And I had been asked for many years, like, different like a Santara, that I would go to her botanica, and she kept saying to me, "When are you going to initiate?" And I had this weird knee jerk, Liz, that we were talking about, like, before, like, if I formally initiate it, how would that affect my other relationships with goddess, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm here to tell you it didn't affect it at all. It was like an expansion. It was just beautiful. It was not
Yeah. Because
it
that
it
feels like very much a
Mhm.
knee-jerk thing of like a
Yeah,
patriarchal culture that has been shaped by a god who said, "Thou shalt have no one else but me."
right,
Right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and even I had that knee jerk, and
Yeah.
but you know what? It it was right. So, what was so funny is my best friend was actually doing her master's. She was in school with 2 Lukumi priests that she really liked, and had talked to me. We kept trying to get together, and it just never worked out. And it was so funny because I contacted her and I said, "I need to see, the man who is now my godfather. I need to see him." I just it was this like this driving force, and put me in touch, and he said, "Oh, my Orisha birthday," excuse me, which is the time of his when he became a priest, was just a couple days away, and he invited me to come,
Mm.
and it was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and just for audiences, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kimberly, Godfather in the I think
Mm.
in the Lakumi tradition refers to it's a spiritual teacher of a particular house. Like that is how you
Yes,
respectfully enter into relationship with the Rishas in that tradition. Is that
exactly.
correct?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah.
and you can have a godfather or godmother,
Yeah.
and uh, my godfather actually, so this is really funny, is half Chinese and half Swedish, and he was born and raised in London.
Wow.
And was completing his doctorate at FIU. He is now a PhD. He works for University of Miami. He buys books for the library. He runs the Cuban collection for University of Miami, and he's an amazing, amazing priest,
Wow.
and Olorisha,
Mm,
and I learned so much from him.
mhm,
So it was really funny because I was like, okay, so I'm ready to initiate. Like I announced it as it was so entitled, right? I mean, it was like,
mm,
I'm ready.
mhm,
And he was so gentle and so kind. And he said to me, well, that is wonderful. Wonderful you feel that way. But we need to do a reading to see what the Orishas say. So to clarify for everyone, okay, the Orishas, like your green light to initiate, your path of initiation and spirituality within Lakumi or Santeria is done through a reading, right? By a very special diviner. And that is where they get the information that begins your spiritual journey. And it's kind of like what the Orishas say. And in many cases, they'll also tell you like who your guardian Orisha is. So when I say a daughter of Oshun, the reason I know that is because of that reading.
mhm.
And I will also say nobody thought I was a daughter of Oshun, including me.
Wow.
I thought it was going to be Oya. Honestly, I really, really
Mm,
did.
mhm. So
Um,
tell us about Oshun and tell us what that means to be a daughter of Oshun. I think Lilith Dorsey, who was on the show a couple years ago, talked about Oshun as
she's a
well.
daughter of Oshun. Yep.
I believe
Yep.
they are. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And there are a lot of them running around. Priestess Brandy Set as well. It's like, amazing. Amazing. Oshun is the goddess of fresh waters. She is honey and everything that is sweet and luxurious and prosperous and abundant and love and passion. And she is also the youngest Orisha. She is also the only Orisha who's a witch.
Mm,
So my second godfather, because in an initiation for your beads, when you receive your beads, um, which is the first kind of initiation and attachment to a house, right? An Orisha house. Um, you have a second godparent. And am I allowed to say the F word, Liz? Because it's like,
yeah.
one of the
Go
things
go for
he
it.
says is, don't nobody fuck with daughters of Oshun. Because it's all sweetness and light and honey. But if you're wrong or you're messing up or whatever it is, as an example, one of the stories is that there was a village of daughters of Oshun in Africa. And of course, Africa has been um, invaded quite a bit with Islam and Christianity.
Yeah.
And there was an army unit approaching Islamic. And so what the daughters of Oshun did in this village is they made a great feast and they adorned themselves. And Oshun loves her hair and adornments and bracelets and drums. The drums are sacred to her, and dance. And they welcomed them in, you know told them how big and strong, and oh, they must be amazing, and please eat and everything. And the next morning none of them woke up because they had all been poisoned by the daughters of Oshun. So Oshun,
Wow.
yeah. So that's what my godfather means. There is and obviously, within the religions, like there are many aspects to Oshun, like over 20. And she has different names, like Ibo Kole, and that is the Oshun, that is the vulture goddess. And, so you are not just a daughter of Oshun, you're a daughter of Oshun of a particular road, Camino.
Mm,
Okay. That is usually done at the big initiation, right? Which I have not received yet, which is why I'm an Aborisha, meaning an initiate, and not an olorisha, which means priest or priestess.
Got it.
Okay. So that's how I identify myself, as daughter of Oshun. So I'm a priestess of goddess, but I'm a daughter of Oshun in the Lukumi tradition, which is an Afro-Cuban religion, right? It's
Yeah.
not a spirituality, it is a religion with rules. And when I entered to be an initiate, and obviously was greenlit by the Orishas, right, in my reading, and my reading was amazing. 2.5 hours, I think I cried the whole time.
Mm.
Um, and, uh, um, and it was a confirmation for me in so many ways. And actually, in the reading, it was said that Oshun had come to me in many, many forms, like Lakshmi,
Mm.
Tara, Mamiwata. Like,
Mhm.
she had had surrogates in my life that were her as well, right? So it was pretty amazing. Um, and so when we talk about a white woman in a religion that belongs to people of color, right?
Yeah.
I can have no knowledge in this life, Liz, of what it is like to be a woman of color.
Yeah.
However, the Orishas called me,
Yeah.
and it was confirmed by ordained and initiated priests. I have great respect for the religion. I'm not looking for any shortcuts. I'm not looking, I'm a
Yeah.
baby. I am a baby in that religion, and I really approach it quite that way. Of course, I have my own relationship with my orishas. I mean, that's part of it, right? But I went to my godfather at one point and I said to him, because I got some hate mail on Motherhouse. When I write about the orishas, I get hate mail. And that's okay, because I know people are feel very emotional about this. And yes, look at me, I mean, I'm obviously German, Irish, English, like, who do I think I am?
Yeah.
But all I could do was answer the orishas. And so what my godfather said is it is only the disrespect, let's put it this way, the disrespect comes in when people take for their own use and do not follow the traditions. But in following the path of initiation, I'm a lineage keeper. I'm a lineage keeper for the religion. And one of the things we also talked about, because my thought process was, look, with everything happening in Africa, with Islamic forces coming in to try and destroy villages, with Christianity coming in to convert people, the Orishas had to leave Africa to survive. They did. And look how they survived. Look how amazing the communities are in the Caribbean, in South America, in North America,
Yeah.
right? The Orishas found a second home, and they traveled there via their priests and priestesses. So the font of my lineage, right, is a priestess of Chango. And she was taken from Western Africa and brought to Cuba. Now, the other thing that's really cool, I want to insert here because some people don't know, in Lukumi, um, Oshun's altars, you'll find Kuan Yin quite a bit. And the
Mm.
reason is because the Chinese were brought there as slaves for the sugar plantations before the Africans. So when the Africans arrived, the Chinese were already there, and they blended a little bit. Like, the Africans looked at Kuan Yin and said, "Oh, she's like our Oshun," right?
Mhm. Yes, and I've heard so much, and Lilith talked about this too, about how there was blending between Catholic saints and
Yes,
how statues, like Catholic statues, were hollowed out on purpose, and then like
yes,
offerings to the Orishas were hidden inside of them. It's
yes.
really, really
Well,
brilliant.
you
Yeah.
have to think about, okay, so you have to think about a little bit. We're looking at Spanish Catholics, right? And if they if the Africans showed too much of their own traditions, that was considered of the devil, right? Obviously,
Yes.
by the Spanish, yeah. So that's exactly what they did. So it's really fascinating. So Chango, right, who is like the king of the Orishas, he's a warrior, and is Santa Barbara, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And there she stands with her castle, right? And a sword, and she's all red and white. So faith, amazing. Obatala, who's kind of like the grandfather, right? I always feel like Obatala is like Buddha, although he has some warrior forms. But for me, Obatala is very gentle. He rules the spirit world.
Yeah.
They did think, my godfather thought I may have been a child of Obatala because of my connection to spirit. But no, Oshun said me. So, but Obatala is Our Lady of Mercy.
Mm.
Oh.
Wow.
Yamaya is Stella Maris,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know?
Well, and isn't there like some blending even there with them? Doesn't isn't is it her feast day that's February 2nd? And then so of course is Bridget's Day from Ireland. Isn't there some
February
overlap there?
2nd is Oya's Day
Oh yeah. Okay.
as Our Lady of Candelaria. Yeah,
Okay.
Oya.
Yeah. Okay.
However, in the Brazilian traditions, right,
Yeah.
they celebrate that day as Yamaya. So there's a crossover.
Yeah.
Um, and wherever people landed, right? So the people that landed in Haiti, that's why they believe in in voodoo, in vodun, and they have loas, which
Hmm.
are sometimes similar to the Orishas,
Yeah.
but they're their own religion. It's their
Yeah.
own religion. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you clarified or just specified that you're talking about a religion, first of all. And then, second of all, I guess what I'm hearing you say is that what it's really about is respect. So, for example, if we are talking about, well, you'll know this better than me, Kimberly, but Hecate, I, if she is part of a living tradition, I think of it as a revivalist tradition.
Yes.
Um, right? There isn't necessarily that, well, not one that I know of publicly that's like an unbroken lineage where her sacred rites have been practiced for the last thousands of years. However, if we are speaking of someone like Kali or Lakshmi or Oshun, these are living traditions. These are
Yeah.
alive and vibrant for many, many people. And so I guess what I'm
Hmm.
hearing you say is it's a matter of respect and how we recognize that these are living traditions. These aren't just like goddesses we can just go pick off a shelf and be like, hey, now you're going to do this for me. It is like coming to them with an understanding that we may have been called and that they are part of a larger tradition that exists today, and learning about it and knowing about it and offering it respect feels really important.
It is extremely important. Listen, the first tenet of, for me, goddess spirituality is research, research, research. Is
Mm-hmm.
understanding the goddess. Listen, if you believe in reincarnation, obviously we have not always been white women, right? But that doesn't entitle you, right?
Yeah.
You have to understand it doesn't entitle you. However, you may find that the Egyptians call you, or the Hindus, or Greeks, or particular goddesses. And so my advice to everyone is honor that calling, but you honor it by finding out more, by figuring out what the living traditions are, if there are any, or what the revivalist traditions are doing. And most importantly, developing your own personal connection,
Yeah.
right? Um, and getting a goddess so she can quote do things for you
Oh God. Yeah.
is wrong.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's just not what it is supposed to be. This is a spirituality. I mean, to me, goddess is a living tradition, right?
Yeah.
Goddess, right? Um, and you have to look at, I mean, Marian devotion has been around for 2000 years. Of course, Isis was the one who preceded her, you
Yes.
know. I mean, before Isis kind of merged with Mother Mary, Isis was the most worshipped goddess on the planet 2,000 years ago.
Mhm.
And of course, the church had plans, and the plans didn't include some kind of Greco-Egyptian goddess, that was making waves. So you'll find that a lot of ancient sites that were Isis, that's where they built churches, you know.
Yes. Yes.
So Mother Mary to me carried the banner in all of her emanations. I mean, this is what's so funny to me, and I never understood when I was in Catholic school and I would question people. Like, how can you be a monotheist when you have a father, a son, Mother Mary? You also have the devil, right? I mean, this is not monotheism.
That
You've
is
got a lot
very
of deities
true.
going on.
That is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So,
interesting.
yeah. And think about Mother Mary and how many emanations she has. And,
Yes.
it's amazing. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So,
Yeah.
to me, Christianity is a religion, obviously, but I kind of treat it the same way I treat Rukumi or Santeria or Buddhism or Islam or anything. It is its own thing.
Yes. Yeah.
It's its own system.
Yeah.
Um, but they're not monotheists, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I hadn't thought about it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. Well, I want to
Yeah.
ask you, I just that our time together has gone by so fast. So I'm like, oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
but I want to ask you, I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I guess I want to ask you, maybe just as a final question to sort of round us out here, like this has obviously been your, I mean, I won't say it's your life's work, but it seems like a huge part of your life's work for some time. And I wonder, at this particular moment in time, we're talking in 2022, and you've
Yeah.
been on this path for a while, what do you see this wisdom of Goddess offering us in this moment, like
Ah,
here?
that's a beautiful question.
Yeah.
Um, she is offering us center and ground and expansion at the same time. Um, as children of Goddess, the picture I have in my mind is the goddess above, the goddess below, and we sit in between. It's like we are the heart chakra.
Mm,
Um, and that's where as above, so below comes from.
mm,
So, Goddess is so important in our world right now because we have lost our way in many cases, right? And it seems like, I know a lot of people are um, terrified of what's going to happen and horrified by what's happened in the United States alone, right? Not to mention the wars and everything else. Um, and Goddess provides us a way to center and ground and also expand. She brings us compassion. She brings us a fierce warrior side as well. She brings us a companion during transitions. She gives us advice. She gives us comfort. And she also gives us a kick in the ass when we need it. I mean, it's not like all like, oh, I mean, there are moments like, I meditate sometimes where I'm in my secret garden and there's Gaia and I can put my head in her lap, right?
mhm,
But then there's also times where I chant. Um, I've had a Sanskrit mantra practice since 2009. Um, and I chant Durga or Kali because I'm ready to go to war, right?
mm,
And I think that so for me, Goddess offers everything, right? There's we jokingly say there's a goddess for that, right? Because I'm always like, hey, you could talk to, or you could pray to, or you could, do this to. So Goddess is there for us, um, and gives us that, it's like the indwelling of the Shekinah, right?
Mhm.
She's an indwelling within us. We have Goddess seeds in us that are just waiting to be nurtured and nourished. And in the same way that we must respect people, other religions who go to temple, who go to church, who go to mosque, who go to chant, to pray. We respect everyone because that is their spiritual center. And Goddess is that for those who are called, right? And
Yeah.
the great thing, I think the really great thing to remember right now, is we are in such a cool time in some ways, because I'm going to tell you, back in 1993, 1995, of 2000, right? If you were a goddess woman walking, people call you a witch, and not in a nice way.
Yeah.
Um, and of the devil, or whatever. But and they still do, okay? However, it's a little bit more mainstream. What is so funny is, like, even 10 years ago, somebody would say, "Oh, are you a witch?" And now they say things like, "Do you do yoga?" Like, like
Yeah.
it's like there's been this kind of very subtle mainstreaming. And I have to tell you, like with Marian devotion as well, that calls people to Goddess. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know, that's kind of a rambling answer,
No,
but
I
she is my life's work, though. Like,
yeah.
completely, fully, my life is in service to her.
I love that. And I thought that was a beautiful answer. And you kind of wove in, something. So I'm glad we got it in here. Just that I referenced in the beginning too, which even for me, I think I was really propelled onto this path. I mean, only 8 years or so, 8 or 9 years ago. And so it feels different to me now than it did before. Like the mainstreaming, what you're speaking of, it feels much more like we are being propelled towards a place of opening and awareness to what she has to teach us, and I'm so
Yeah.
grateful for that. And also, frankly, Kimberly, like I said in the beginning, very grateful for your role in that. And
Mhm.
so thank you for helping us navigate and find our way, as I say, home to her. It is much
Yes.
appreciated. It's sacred work, so thank you.
Thank you, and thank you. And like, I don't want people to be afraid to approach Goddess in any of her forms.
Yeah.
I want them, but you do it respectfully. I am available. I am pretty easy to contact or connect with. If you've got a question about a goddess, it's not on Motherhouse. You know what? Contact me. I There is no greater joy in my life than talking about Goddess. And
Mm.
you know what's so exciting is that 28 years ago is when I started my formal path to Goddess. And I have been priestessing for her for about 25 years. And it is as new and exciting now as it was then.
Mm.
And
Oh,
that to me is really the gift, right?
yeah.
It's not like we have to go over same scripture blah, blah, all the time. No, look at how alive and vibrant it is. And you know what's really cool? Like here in little Delaware, we have a Lakshmi temple.
Oh, wow.
And do you know what we also have that arrived during the pandemic, Liz, that is so cool?
What?
We have the tallest Hanuman, the monkey god,
Yeah.
in the United States. And he
Wow.
arrived during the pandemic. And I got to go see him because I've kind of lived in a bubble because of my health issues during the pandemic. I got to go see him.
Oh, very
And
cool.
oh my God. And he is the heart of Goddess. He represents devotion and strength.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, so there's so many options, right?
Yeah.
And part of Mother House and Mystery School of the Goddess is that we offer free events. We offer ways to connect. We offer, information.
Yeah.
You know, yes, we have classes that you can pay for that, because that's another kind of thing for me is that priestesses should be paid for their work.
Yeah.
Practitioners should be paid for their work.
Yeah.
They put a lot into their training, and but at the same time, as a community, we offer a lot of free things. So,
Yes. And so if people want to learn more, it's motherhouseofthegoddess.com, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
you can find you there, your radio, the podcast,
yeah,
Goddess Alive Radio, and all there's a lot there. So if you've not gone, go check it out for sure.
yeah. Liz, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. What a joy to be in conversation with you. I'm so grateful for your
Oh,
time.
and you as well. Thank you for great questions. Thank
Oh,
you.
oh, good. Well, thanks for good answers.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, and thanks to all of you guys for listening, as always, and joining us here. Hey, one thing I wanted to mention, I keep forgetting to do this. I think I did, when I first started doing video episodes, but I had some requests from the community to make these available to hearing impaired. And so this is the best way I know how to do it. So there are, if you're listening to this, these episodes are available at least starting this year on, and that's 2022. On YouTube. So just go to Home to Her, or go to YouTube and look for Home to Her. I'll put this in the show notes, as well as the link to Kimberly's site and some other things that we talked about today. And if you know people who are hearing impaired that want to access this and would like to be able to see captions of this, and just if you're just curious what we look like, you can do that too. You can go check us out on YouTube. Yeah. So yes, thank you guys all for joining us. And until next time, I will talk to you again very soon.